We're joined by Jonathan Lockwood today. He's in the middle of a big vaccine fight in California. He has an amazing Facebook page. We're going to share the link up right here. You can follow him there and all this developing news regarding you're specifically fighting SB 276. That's the big problem, Bill?
Yeah, so I flew down from Oregon as soon as the legislative session in Oregon ended to help fight down here. We defeated House Bill 3063 in Oregon, and I came out to the West Coast because they need more fire here, and I think what we're seeing is a massive uprising against the left coast mentality of the Democrats. And so I flew down here when the appropriations hearing for Senate Bill 276 was being held, and I haven't left since. This bill is a horrible bill. A lot of people think it's like a mandating vaccines bill. It's actually not. It was to end medical exemptions. So even if children have been previously injured by vaccines, that their doctors would not be able to issue out those much needed exemptions. And what ended up happening is Governor Newsom, he chose to side with pharma over families and signed not only that bill, but also Senate Bill 714. Basically, these bills are a war on protecting children who have already been injured by vaccines and would force them to continue receiving more vaccines.
So I remember watching a documentary on Showtime. Penn and Teller did an episode on vaccines, and they had an uncharacteristically anti-libertarian position where they saw, I think they were defending mandatory vaccines, which I'm against. And I think it's a real problem. I understand why if you run a nursing home, can put on your door, you're not allowed to enter the building unless you have a flu vaccine. Like, that would be a private decision of a private institution saying you're not allowed to enter the building if you're not vaccinated because this is an old person's home and our guests here are susceptible. But these bills are not logical like that. I heard Cernovich was talking about a story. A kid got seizures from a vaccine, and he was issued an exemption. So you're saying the SB 276 bill would prevent him from being exempt from needing a mandatory vaccine?
Yeah, essentially your child would have to die to not receive another vaccine here in California, and there is no place in a so-called California for all with this bill. And even what you're saying with the flu shot and the elderly, I mean, a lot of people think that this is about only kids or only parents that don't want to vaccinate their children. What this issue is really about is the fact that there is no better, and what's interesting, you bringing up that segment that they did with an anti-libertarian message, is that there's no better example of crony capitalism than the vaccine manufacturers. So there has not been one single safety report given to Congress per the law that gave the manufacturers of vaccines immunity. So the 1986 National Childhood Vaccine Injury Act gave them immunity. And in that law was also required to submit safety reports to Congress, and it's never been done. The year I was born, 1988, was the first year safety report was due. And so millennials have been, their entire lives, have been vaccinated with unsafe vaccines. And a lot of millennials are now becoming parents. And our generation has not only been given by previous generations a worse off economic future, a more dangerous global stage, but also a worse off healthcare system. 54% of children have chronic health conditions, and a lot of millennials are becoming parents. And so young generations and future generations are being harmed by the vaccine regime. And we really have a vaccine crisis, along the lines of the opioid crisis. And so when Governor Newsom says, pharma's putting profits ahead of people, and I'm not going to stand for that. He sanctioned that vaccine injury and death is just going to keep on happening. So every single vaccine injury and death now that occurs in California, it's going to be on him. It's on him.
Yeah, Gavin Newsom. I'm the thing is, I'm not a Gavin Newsom fan. He did write a book that I tell people to read called Citizenville, which it seems like he wrote a book that talks about how everything he does is bad. And I'm like, I always try to wrap my head around that. I'm like, you have to read his book to like what is this guy doing there? But it's very interesting. So, you know, I don't consider myself an anti-vaxxer. However, when I have looked through some of this information, there are some vaccines that clearly seem more problematic than others.
Right.
Like some of these multi-vaccines, I forget which ones off the top of my head. And there was a guy who I think is a very reputable LA figure. We had, I guess, a bit of a falling out. Owns a propaganda firm called Phantom Firm. And he was telling me himself how when he looked at vaccines, that some of these were in fact problematic. And he's like a hardcore lefty liberal. And so the problem is how they chill these conversations. And anyone that wants to talk about vaccines, you're immediately smeared as an anti-vaxxer, and they blame you for measles or bubonic plague or whatever it is. And I think it's very problematic. So do you see a difference between anti-vaxxers and people who want common sense, just like caution when it comes to government overreach and these mandatory vaccines? Because that's the big problem that I see is the government enforced mandatory vaccines where they're basically setting the precedent for them to just be able to inject you whatever they want.
Right. So if you're going to mandate vaccines and anything that's considered a vaccine can and will be injected for the quote greater good and because of public health and safety, anything could be injected into you. And the thing is, what people need to know is if you so much as skip a flu shot or the HPV vaccine, you are considered an anti-vaxxer by the people pushing these bills. So if you skip just one vaccine, or even if you're not going to skip any, if you so much as spread out your kids' vaccines, you can't do that under these bills. So there's no choice at all in the matter. And the other thing is, like, you know, semantics don't mean anything anymore, especially to the left. And when you look at, like, okay, what is an anti-vaxxer? No one can really define it. And if you look at what is a pro-vaxxer, well, a pro-vaxxer is like what? You're pro the idea that vaccines are a good thing. Well, these vaccines are not fitting even what you would consider is a good vaccine because they're not even effective. A lot of the outbreaks that have happened have occurred because of people who have had the vaccines contracting it. So how's that? Well, in Oregon, we requested from one of the health departments, the Oregon Health Authority, the exact strain of the measles that was contracted. They would not give it. And it's because the measles outbreaks that you're seeing are not able to be vaccinated against. And so a lot of these include foreign travel. And the other thing is this is big pharma. And so when you see a bunch of Democrats, and you have to remember, everyone that is pushing these bills, they're all Democrats. They're all Democrats. So the West Coast, which is pretty liberal, and they're more liberal in the idea of like the belief of being liberal. They're not necessarily these super commie, leftist statists. They're not. You talk to them, they just want to be able to like live their life. They don't necessarily care how other people live theirs, and they're finding out really the hard way what electing a Democrat supermajority is going to get you, and it's going to get your kids slapped upon the altar of big pharma. And the other thing that people need to remember too is that the vaccine issue is tied very closely to the psych drugs that are being peddled on kids. And, I got involved in the vaccine issue along, the same courses, I was working against the satanic governor of Oregon, Kate Brown, who is literally shipping kids across state line, foster children ripped from Oregon homes. They do that at a rate way higher than other states. They take those kids from Oregon homes and ship them across state lines into a network of psychiatric facilities where they're drugged and all this, abused, tortured, raped, and a whole lot of other issues happen, like guns get drawn on them when they try to escape different facilities all across the country. I mean, that's a rabbit hole of an issue to get on this, but the state of Oregon was investing in those psych facilities at the same time as they were paying those psych facilities to place children in to pay for state workers' retirement plans. So when you look at what's happening, there's a war on children, because somewhere along the way, people behind this and the vaccines and the whole education system, it's all connected, and they're using kids and exploiting children, and it's evil.
Is this the SSRI? Are those the kind of psych drugs that they're doing, or is this like an MK Ultra kind of thing? Or I would love to put up an article or something to help people follow their nose, because I'm in New York, and a lot of this stuff, when I put this in front of people's faces, it opens all sorts of cans of worms. But I do think people are passionate about getting to the bottom of these things, especially when they have the time to just sort of like calm down and listen.
Yeah. So people can look up the Clarinda Academy, Acadia psychiatric facilities. There's a lot of these Sequel Youth and Family Services are these psych facilities. But we have to know that these kids are being injected with psychotropic drugs. They're being vaccinated. Usually they already have been vaccinated. They just pump them full of drugs, and it's big money. So these people see children as assets of the state and of pharma. So we basically have a pharma state in the United States, and it's mind-boggling, and the death toll that's associated with this. And you have to think too, like, okay, school shootings, they claim to care about kids to use it. What do? Try to take away the Second Amendment. And what's behind all of the school shootings? Psych drugs. So it's like, when you look at all of these issues linked together, all they're doing is creating all of these situations that really the human cost to it is children. And then they use all of these crises manufactured to take away constitutional rights. So, I mean, my big message is just that this is a lot more connected than anybody probably ever thought.
You were talking about how you think a lot of this stuff is connected, that we're in a pharma state and the toll is children. And I think to play devil's advocate here, a lot of people are concerned with what they perceive anti-vaxxers to be. And they think that, the reason you need mandatory vaccines is because otherwise, measles is going to break out or polio is going to come back. So basically, the way I see the solution, like the compromise should be like, okay, we cannot allow government to mandate vaccines. I think that is crazy talk. But if you're a private school, or you own a nursing home, or like if a private institution wants to bar access to people who aren't vaccinated, like, I think that should be up to the discretion of the private school or the nursing home, etc. I actually think we should get rid of the Department of Education and get rid of public schools and all sorts of stuff altogether. But so that's what do you think about that? What do you think about private institutions, like, using their discretion to say, okay, you're not allowed into our private school unless you're vaccinated? Because that is different than the government saying, we're going to fine you or throw you in jail or if we manage to subdue you, like we can inject you while you're, in our custody, right? I feel like, because that's where this stuff leads, doesn't it? Or am I paranoid?
Right. I agree with you. Listen, if a private institution wants to mandate that you take 10 pills before you walk in the door and inject yourself with 10 different syringes, you don't have to go in there.
Right.
You don't have to go.
Right.
And they probably won't be in business very long. So, that's a totally different thing than the government, forcibly injecting children or anyone, an adult, for that, at the point of a gun. That's what it is. And even a Democrat Governor Jared Polis said when he decided to torpedo the mandate bill that went through in Colorado, he said you can't forcibly vaccinate children at the point of a gun. So that's a Democrat, a very far left Democrat that said that. So obviously not all Democrats have been captured by pharma, but state agencies have been infiltrated by pharma, and lawmakers are not even understanding what they're even doing. That's what's so disgusting about it. It's like you're elected to be a lawmaker, not a lawbreaker. And so we have to really make sure that people are electing people who care about the Constitution and care about their oath, because there's no, these people that are running these bills, they don't even understand what they're doing. And they are so unwilling to confront the fact that vaccine injury and death is real. Federal law and the Supreme Court recognized it. In fact, the liberal Supreme Court justices Sotomayor and RBG, they dissented in the court opinion in 2011 that upheld the 1986 NCVIA that gave the manufacturers immunity from, being held accountable for killing and injuring children. RBG and Sotomayor sided with us on mandatory vaccines and the vaccine regime, saying that that's not what Congress intended.
Well, this is great. I want to thank you so much for the work that you're doing. If there was like one thing you could tell people to do that they could help you fight this.
Yeah. So consciencecoalition.com/donate. I'm the executive director of Conscience Coalition, and we are fighting not only here in California, but also in Florida. And we're branching out into other states, including New York. So I might have to meet you when I'm up there. But,
yes.
Yeah. So go to consciencecoalition.com/donate, and really we can use everything to help us out. I mean, we've been holding protests and rallies and really like bringing down the house here in California. And we're going to be doing more. We've held vigils, and we're going to continue doing that this week. So thank you so much for having me and really taking the time to talk about this.
Jonathan, thank you so much. Good luck at the Capitol, and hope to see you in New York soon.